The smell of disinfectant and false hope filled my nostrils as I sat in that sterile waiting room, staring at my phone screen in complete shock. There it was, clear as day, a notification from our joint bank account. $15,000 withdrawn. Emergency fund. Gone. The same emergency fund we'd built specifically for my cancer treatment. The one Emma had promised would always be there when I needed it most. But what made my blood run cold wasn't just the missing money, it was the timestamp. Yesterday, 2:47 p.m. The exact same time I was getting my third round of chemotherapy. While she was supposedly at work, worried sick about me. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. 3 months earlier, I thought I had the perfect life. Marcus Williams, 32 years old, successful software engineer at TechFlow Solutions in Austin, Texas. I had a beautiful wife, Emma, who worked in marketing at BrandScope, a downtown loft with amazing city views, and a future that seemed bright and secure. We'd been together for 4 years, married for 2, and despite the usual ups and downs, I genuinely believed we were building something solid together. Then came that Tuesday morning in March, when everything started unraveling. I'd been feeling exhausted for weeks, attributing it to long hours at work and stress from a major client project. Emma kept telling me I was overreacting, that I just needed more sleep and less caffeine. When I finally dragged myself to the doctor after nearly passing out during a team meeting, I expected to hear about vitamin deficiency or maybe burnout. Stage 2 lymphoma. The words hit me like a freight train. Dr. Martinez at Cedar Park Medical Center delivered the news with practiced compassion. But all I could hear was the ringing in my ears and my own heartbeat thundering against my chest. Cancer. At 32. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd spent years writing code to solve complex problems. But suddenly, I was facing something no algorithm could fix. I called Emma immediately after leaving the doctor's office, my hand shaking as I dialed her number. She was in a client meeting, her assistant said, but would call me back within the hour. An hour turned into 3. When she finally called, I was sitting in my car in the hospital parking lot, watching people walk in and out of the building that would become my second home. Marcus. Sorry, crazy day here. David's campaign is hitting some snags and we're in full crisis mode. What's up? Her voice carried that familiar edge of impatience she got when work consumed her attention. Emma, I need you to sit down. I'm kind of swamped right now. Can we talk tonight? I have cancer. The silence that followed felt endless. When she finally spoke, her voice had changed completely. Softer, almost fragile. What? That's not. What kind of cancer? Are you sure? Did they run tests? I explained everything Dr. Martinez had told me about lymphoma, about the treatment plan, about the 8 months of chemotherapy that lay ahead. Emma listened without interrupting. And for the first time in weeks, I felt like I had her complete attention. I'm coming to get you right now, she said. Don't drive anywhere. Just wait for me. That night, Emma held me while I cried. She stroked my hair and whispered reassurances about beating this thing together. She researched lymphoma survival. Rates on her laptop until 2 in the morning. Printing out articles about nutrition during chemo and success stories from other patients. For the first time since we'd gotten married, I felt like we were truly a team. The next few weeks blurred together in a haze of medical appointments, insurance paperwork, and treatment planning. Emma came to every oncology consultation, took detailed notes, and asked questions I was too overwhelmed to think of. She even started cooking elaborate, healthy meals, claiming she'd read that proper nutrition was crucial for treatment success. Dr. Martinez referred me to the Texas Oncology Center for my chemotherapy sessions. The facility was modern and surprisingly welcoming, with large windows and artwork on the walls that tried to make you forget why you were there. My first treatment was scheduled for a Thursday morning, and Emma had cleared her entire day to be with me. But that Wednesday night, she got a call from work. David Chen, one of her biggest clients, was having what she described as a complete meltdown about his marketing campaign. His company was launching a new product line, and apparently, the promotional strategy they'd developed wasn't working. Emma spent 2 hours on the phone with him, pacing around our loft and speaking in the soothing tone she usually reserved for calming me down. "Babe, I might have to go in early tomorrow to handle this David situation," she said after hanging up. "But I'll definitely be at the cancer center by the time your treatment starts." I felt a knot form in my stomach. "Emma, this is my first chemo session. I really need you there from the beginning, and I will be. I promise. It's just that David is in such a bad place right now and his contract is worth a quarter of my annual commission. I just need to get him stabilized first." The next morning, Emma left before I woke up. She'd written a note saying she'd meet me at the treatment center at 9:30. My appointment was at 9. I called her twice on the drive over, but both calls went straight to voicemail. Riley Patterson was working the oncology floor that day. Hadn't seen my childhood friend in almost 2 years, not since she'd moved back to Austin after finishing her nurse practitioner program in Houston. She looked exactly the same. Auburn hair pulled back in a ponytail, green eyes that seemed to see everything, and that warm smile that had gotten me through some rough patches during our teenage years. "Marcus Williams," she said, reading from her tablet as I checked in. "Wait, Marcus. Holy cow, what are you doing here?" Explaining my diagnosis to Riley felt different than telling Emma. Maybe it was because Riley understood the medical side. Or maybe it was because she'd known me since we were kids. But she listened with a combination of professional competence and personal concern that made me feel genuinely cared for. "Where's your support person today?" she asked as she prepared my wife should be here soon. Work emergency." Riley nodded without judgment, but I caught something flicker across her expression. "Well, you've got me today. I'll make sure you're comfortable." Emma arrived 2 hours into my 4-hour treatment session. She burst through the door looking frazzled, clutching her phone and a coffee cup. "Marcus, I'm so sorry. David's campaign imploded this morning, and we had to completely rebuild the messaging strategy from scratch. I wanted to be understanding. I really did. Emma worked hard, and her job was important to her. But sitting there with poison flowing through my veins, while she dealt with someone else's marketing problems, felt like a preview of what the next 8 months might look like." Riley watched this interaction from across the room, and when Emma stepped out to take another call from David, she came over to check my vitals. "Everything okay?" she asked quietly. "Yeah, just... You know how work can be." Riley adjusted my four and made a note on her tablet. "Marcus, I've been doing this for 5 years. Patients who have strong support systems do better, not just statistically. I see it every day. Make sure you're getting what you need, okay?" That afternoon, Emma was attentive and caring. She asked the nurses questions about side effects, took pictures of my discharge instructions, and stopped at the pharmacy to pick up my anti-nausea medication. She even suggested we order dinner from my favorite barbecue place as a small celebration for getting through the first treatment, but her phone kept buzzing. David again. Each time it rang, I could see Emma's attention drift. She'd glance at the screen, and even when she didn't answer, I knew part of her mind was elsewhere. "You can take it," I finally said during dinner. "I know he needs you." "No, absolutely not. This is our time. David can wait." But David didn't wait. Over the next few weeks, his crisis seemed to multiply. Late-night calls, weekend emergencies, constant text messages that Emma would read and respond to, even during my medical appointments. She started missing some of my treatments altogether, claiming David's campaign launch was in a critical phase and she couldn't step away. I began going to chemo sessions alone, which meant spending a lot more time talking to Riley. She had this way of making the treatment room feel less clinical, bringing me books she thought I'd like and updating me on mutual friends from high school. During my 5th session, she mentioned that her hospital offered a photography program for cancer patients, a way to document the journey and find beauty even during difficult times. "I haven't touched my camera in months," I admitted. "Used to love it, but since the diagnosis, everything just feels overwhelming." "Yeah, like nothing matters except getting through this." Riley sat down in the chair next to my treatment recliner. "Marcus, surviving cancer isn't just about the medical stuff. It's about maintaining the parts of yourself that make life worth living. Maybe it's time to pick up that camera again that weekend." I decided to take Riley's advice. I drove out to Zilker Park with my Nikon, intending to capture some of the spring wildflowers that were just starting to bloom. I hadn't told Emma where I was going. She was dealing with another David emergency and barely looked up when I said I was heading out. The photography felt good, therapeutic even. I found myself focusing on small details, the way morning light caught dewdrops on petals, the texture of tree bark, the patterns clouds made across the sky. For the first time in weeks, I felt like myself again, rather than just a cancer patient. When I got home that evening, Emma was on the couch with her laptop, surrounded by marketing materials and campaign mock-ups. She glanced up briefly when I walked in. "How was your day?" she asked, but her eyes had already returned to her screen. "Good!" "Went out to take some photos." "That's nice, babe." I sat down next to her, hoping to share some of the pictures I'd taken, but her phone rang. Before I could pull out my camera, "Sorry, it's David again," she said, answering immediately. "Davey, hi?" "No." I was just reviewing the focus group feedback. I watched her face as she talked to him. There was an energy there, an engagement that I realized I hadn't seen when. She talked to me in weeks. She laughed at something he said, and the sound was bright and genuine in a way that felt unfamiliar. That night, as Emma worked late on David's campaign, I lay in bed thinking about Riley's words. Strong support systems. Getting what you need. I was starting to realize that what I needed and what I was getting were two very different things. The next morning brought my routine blood work appointment, and the results weren't great. My white cell count was lower than Dr. Martinez wanted to see, which meant my body was struggling more than expected with the chemotherapy he recommended, increasing my anti-nausea medication, and suggested I might need a treatment break if things didn't improve. I called Emma from the hospital parking lot to update her on the appointment. Her voicemail picked up after 3 rings. I tried again. An hour later, same result. Finally, at dinner time, she called me back. "Marcus, sorry I missed your calls. We're in the middle of David's campaign launch and it's been absolute chaos. How did the appointment go?" I explained about the blood work and the possibility of delaying treatment. Emma made appropriate concerned noises, but I could hear typing in the background. "Are you on your computer right now?" "Sorry, just finishing up this email to David." "I'm listening, I promise." "So, Dr. Martinez wants to increase your medication?" That's when it hit me. I was fighting for my life, and my wife was multitasking through our conversation about it. The realization felt like a physical blow, and for the first time since my diagnosis, I wondered if I was facing this battle more alone than I'd realized. The emergency fund had been Emma's idea originally. "We need to be prepared for anything," she'd said after my diagnosis. "Medical bills, time off work, unexpected expenses. Let's build a cushion so you can focus on getting better instead of worrying about money." We'd both contributed to it over the past 2 months, my savings from years of careful financial planning. And what Emma claimed was her own money from commissions and bonuses, $15,000, enough to cover my treatment costs that insurance wouldn't handle, plus living expenses if I needed extended time off work. I'd checked the account balance obsessively at first, finding comfort in seeing that safety net growing. But as my treatment progressed and I felt increasingly sick, I'd stopped monitoring it as closely. Emma handled most of our finances anyway, and I trusted her completely, which made staring at that withdrawal notification in the chemo ward waiting room feel like the ground was opening beneath me. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. $15,000. Gone. Yesterday at 2:47 p.m. While I was sitting in a treatment chair getting poison pumped into my veins, believing my wife was at work worrying about me. My hands were shaking as I scrolled through the account history. There were other withdrawals too, smaller ones over the past few weeks. 500 here, 800 there, during my treatment times. All while I'd been focused on trying to survive. Riley appeared in the waiting room doorway, scanning for her next patient. When she saw me, her professional smile faltered. "Marcus, you look like you've seen a ghost. Everything okay?" I held up my phone, not trusting my voice. Riley sat down next to me and looked at the screen. I watched her expression change as she processed what she was seeing. This is your medical fund? I nodded. When was this withdrawal made? Yesterday, during my treatment. Riley was quiet for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was carefully controlled. Marcus, where did Emma say she was yesterday afternoon? At work. Dealing with David's campaign crisis. Riley stood up slowly. Come on, let's get you set up for today's treatment, and then I think you and I need to have a serious conversation. As I followed her down the hallway toward the treatment room, my phone buzzed with a text message from Emma. Working late again tonight. David's launch event is tomorrow, and we're still putting out fires. Love you, babe. How's chemo going? I stared at the message for a long time before deleting it without responding. For the first time since my diagnosis, I wasn't thinking about cancer cells or treatment protocols or survival rates. I was thinking about betrayal, about how sometimes the thing that destroys you isn't the disease you're fighting, it's the person you trusted to fight it with you. Riley closed the treatment room door behind us and gestured for me to take my usual spot in the recliner by the window. The familiar routine of setting up the four should have been comforting, but my mind was spinning with questions I wasn't ready to ask out loud. She worked efficiently, checking my vitals and preparing the chemotherapy drugs. But I could tell she was processing what we'd just discovered in the waiting room. Marcus, I need to ask you something, and I want you to really think about your answer, she said as she adjusted the 4 drip. Over the past few weeks, have you noticed any other changes in Emma's behavior? Beyond just being busy with work? I leaned back in the chair and closed my eyes. The question opened a floodgate of memories I'd been pushing aside. She's been different, more secretive with her phone. She used to leave it lying around, but now she takes it everywhere, even to the bathroom. She's been dressing differently. For work? More? I don't know. Put together? Like she's trying to impress someone? When did this start? Right around the time David's campaign supposedly went into crisis mode, maybe 6 weeks ago. I opened my eyes and looked at Riley. You think there's something going on between them, don't you? Riley pulled up a chair next to my recliner. I think you're dealing with enough without having to wonder about your wife's priorities. But Marcus, that money didn't disappear by accident. Someone made a deliberate choice to take it, and the timing suggests it wasn't an emergency medical expense. The implications of what she was saying hit me like a wave of nausea that had nothing to do with chemotherapy. $15,000. Our entire medical safety net. Gone while I was literally fighting for my life. The betrayal felt almost worse than the cancer diagnosis itself. What should I do? I asked. First, you focus on getting through today's treatment. Then, you figure out what's really going on. But Marcus, whatever you discover, remember that you deserve better than this. Cancer doesn't make you less worthy of love and support. It makes you more deserving of it. I spent the next 4 hours thinking about everything that had changed since my diagnosis. Emma's gradual distancing hadn't happened overnight. It had been subtle at first, easy to explain away with work stress and my own health struggles. But, looking back with clearer eyes, I could see the pattern emerging. The late-night phone calls with David had started innocently enough. Client management, she'd called it. But they'd grown longer and more frequent, often lasting well past midnight. Emma would take these calls in our bedroom while I slept on the couch, claiming she didn't want to disturb my rest. At the time, I'd appreciated her thoughtfulness. Now I wondered what they were really discussing during those marathon conversations. Her physical affection toward me had also changed. We'd gone from being naturally touchy and connected to barely making physical contact beyond obligatory goodnight kisses. Emma blamed it on being afraid of getting me sick during treatment, but I'd asked Dr. Martinez about it weeks ago. He'd assured me that normal physical affection posed no risk to my immune system. When Riley finished my treatment that afternoon, she walked me to the parking garage. Marcus, can I give you some advice from someone who's watched a lot of couples navigate cancer together? I nodded, not trusting my voice. The patients who do best are the ones who feel genuinely supported and loved. It's not just tolerated or managed, but truly cherished by their partners. If Emma is dealing with her own struggles about your diagnosis, that's understandable, but taking your medical fund to spend on someone else crosses every line there is. That evening, I decided to take control of the situation. I drove home with a plan forming in my mind. I would confront Emma directly about the missing money. There had to be an explanation. Maybe David's company was having financial troubles, and Emma had loaned him money from our account, intending to replace it before I noticed. Maybe there was a banking error or identity theft, or some other logical explanation that didn't involve the worst-case scenario my brain kept conjuring. Emma wasn't home when I arrived at our loft. Her car wasn't in the parking garage, and she hadn't left a note. I tried calling her, but the call went straight to voicemail. I texted asking where she was and got no response. I spent the evening going through our shared computer, looking for clues about what had happened to our money. Emma and I had always been open about our finances, sharing passwords and keeping joint accounts. But when I tried to log into our banking website, I discovered she'd changed the password. Same thing happened when I tried to access our credit card accounts. The password changes felt like another punch to the gut. Emma had systematically locked me out of our financial information while I was focused on staying alive. The level of planning this required made it clear that whatever was happening wasn't impulsive or accidental. Around 10 p.m., I heard Emma's key in the front door. She came in looking flustered, her hair slightly messed, and her lipstick gone. She was carrying takeout bags from an expensive downtown restaurant, the kind of place we used to go for special occasions before medical bills became our priority. "Hey babe, sorry I'm so late. David's launch event is tomorrow and we had to work through dinner to finalize everything." She held up the takeout bags. "I brought you some of that pasta you liked from Uchiko." I watched her bustling around the kitchen, unpacking containers and talking about her day. She seemed almost manic in her energy, filling the silence with chatter about focus groups and marketing metrics. It was only when she finally stopped talking and looked at me that she seemed to notice something was wrong. "Marcus, you're being really quiet. How was treatment today? Our emergency fund is gone." Emma froze with a container of pasta halfway. "To the microwave? What do you mean gone? $15,000? Withdrawn yesterday at 2:47 p.m. while I was getting chemotherapy?" I watched her face carefully, looking for surprise, confusion, or any reaction that would suggest she didn't know what I was talking about. Instead, I saw something that looked like panic flicker across her features before she composed herself. "That's impossible. Are you sure you're looking at the right account?" "I'm sure. I'm also sure that you changed all our banking passwords without telling me." Emma set down the food container and turned to face me fully. "Marcus, you're going through a really stressful time. The medications can sometimes affect your memory and perception. Maybe you're confused about which account you were looking at." The fact that she was gaslighting me instead of showing concern about missing money told me everything I needed to know. Emma knew exactly where that money had gone, and she was prepared to make me question my own sanity rather than tell me the truth. "Show me the account then," I said. "If I'm confused, prove it. I don't think going through our finances when you're this upset is a good idea. We can look at everything together tomorrow when you're feeling better." Now I stood up from the couch, feeling steadier than I had in weeks. "Emma, I'm not confused, and I'm not having medication side effects. $15,000 is missing from our account. You changed our passwords without telling me, and you're lying to my face about it. What I want to know is where the money went." Emma's composure finally cracked. "Fine, yes, I moved some money around. But it's not what you think. David's company was having cash flow issues and they couldn't make payroll. His employees were going to lose their jobs right before Christmas. I loaned him the money temporarily, just until his investor funding comes through next week. Loaned our medical emergency fund to your client without asking me. I knew you'd say no. But Marcus, these people have families. Kids who depend on Christmas bonuses and health insurance. I couldn't just let them suffer when I had the ability to help." The manipulation in her words was breathtaking. She'd positioned herself as a humanitarian while stealing from her cancer-stricken husband, and she was trying to make me feel guilty for questioning it. "When exactly is this money coming back?" "David said the investment should close by Friday. Maybe Monday at the latest. And if it doesn't?" Emma hesitated. "It will. David's company is solid. This is just a temporary cash flow problem." I pulled out my phone and opened our banking app. "Emma, I want you to call David right now and ask him to wire back our money immediately." "Marcus, it's late. I can't." "Just call him and demand money back." Doesn't work that way in business. Then I'll call him myself. The look of pure terror that crossed Emma's face told me everything I needed to know. There was no legitimate business loan. There was no investor funding coming through. David might not even know that Emma had told me this story. Whatever she'd done with our money, it wasn't some noble gesture to save jobs. You can't call David, she said quickly. The loan arrangement is confidential. If you interfere, it could jeopardize his entire company. I stared at my wife, this woman I'd loved and trusted for 4 years, and felt something fundamental shift inside me. The cancer had already taken my energy, my hair, and my sense of physical security. But Emma's betrayal was taking something deeper. It was taking my ability to trust my own judgment about the people closest to me. Emma, I want you to get your laptop and show me the loan documentation. If this is a legitimate business transaction, you'll have contracts, repayment terms, something in writing. I don't have to prove anything to you, Marcus. You're being paranoid and controlling, and frankly, it's making me uncomfortable. The projection was remarkable. I was being controlling. For wanting to know where our medical emergency fund had gone, I was being paranoid for questioning why my wife had secretly moved our money and changed our passwords. Get out, I said quietly. What? I want you to pack a bag and leave. Tonight. Go stay at your sister's or wherever you want, but I can't be around you right now. Emma's demeanor shifted again, this time to pleading. Marcus, you're sick, and you're scared, and you're not thinking clearly. I understand why you're upset, but we can work through this. Don't make decisions when you're this emotional. The only emotion I'm feeling right now is clarity. For the first time in months, I can see exactly what's been happening. You've been stealing from me while I'm fighting cancer, lying to my face about it, and now you're trying to convince me that I'm crazy for noticing. I want you gone. Emma grabbed my hands, and I noticed for the first time that she was wearing a new bracelet, expensive looking with what appeared to be real diamonds. Marcus, please, I love you. We're married. We're supposed to support each other through sickness and health, remember? I pulled my hands away. You're right, we were supposed to support each other. But support doesn't involve stealing medical funds and lying about it. Pack your things. Emma, I'm done. She stood there for another moment, seeming to weigh her options. Finally, she nodded stiffly. Fine, but when you calm down and realize you're making a mistake, I might not be ready to forgive you for throwing me out during the worst time in our marriage. I watched her pack a suitcase, throwing clothes and toiletries into it with angry and jerky movements. She paused at the bathroom mirror to check her appearance, and I caught sight of her phone screen when a text message came in. The name on the display was David, and the preview showed, "Can't wait to see you tomorrow night after the launch party. Love." The message was cut off, but I'd seen enough. Emma quickly grabbed the phone and shoved it into her purse, but not before I noticed her slight smile as she read the full message. I'll be in touch about getting the money back, I said as she headed for the door. Marcus, I really think you should focus on your treatment and let me handle our finances. All this stress isn't good for your recovery. After she left, I sat in our empty loft, feeling strangely peaceful for the first time in weeks. The place felt bigger, without Emma's restless energy filling it. I looked around at the life we'd built together and realized how much of it had been built on my accommodation of her needs and wants. The expensive furniture she'd insisted on, the location she'd chosen, the social commitments that revolved around her work connections. I picked up my camera from the shelf where it had been gathering dust and scrolled through the photos I'd taken at Zilker Park. There was beauty there. Even in the midst of struggle, the wildflowers didn't know they were growing in difficult soil. They just reached toward the light and bloomed anyway. My phone buzzed with a text from Riley. How did the rest of your day go? Thinking about you. For the first time in months, someone was thinking about me. Not about what I could provide or how I could be useful, but about me as a person going through a difficult time. The simple kindness of it made my chest tight with emotion. I texted back, "It's been a day of revelations. Emma's gone for now. Thank you for helping me see clearly today." Her response came quickly. "I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself. It takes courage, especially when you're already fighting such a big battle. You deserve people in your life who show up for you." I set the phone aside and walked out onto our balcony. The Austin skyline stretched out below me, thousands of lights representing thousands of lives. Somewhere out there, Emma was probably with David, celebrating the successful theft of my medical fund while I sat alone dealing with the aftermath of her betrayal. But for the first time since my diagnosis, I felt like I was exactly where I needed to be. Fighting for my life, yes, but finally fighting for the right things. My health, my dignity, and my right to be surrounded by people who actually cared, whether I lived or died. The battle was far from over, but at least now I knew who my real enemies were. The next morning brought an unexpected knock at my door. I'd barely slept, my mind churning through everything that had happened, and I was nursing my second cup of coffee when the insistent rapping started. Through the peephole, I saw a man I didn't recognize holding what looked like legal documents. Marcus Williams. I'm serving you with a temporary restraining order filed by Emma Williams. I stared at the papers in disbelief. Emma had gone to court and claimed I was threatening her safety. According to the documents, I was prohibited from contacting her, going to her workplace, or interfering with her business relationships. The restraining order specifically mentioned that any attempt to contact her clients could result in my arrest. The irony was staggering. Emma had stolen my medical fund, lied about it, was apparently having an affair, but somehow I was the dangerous one who needed to be legally restrained. The manipulation had reached a level I hadn't thought possible. My phone rang as I was reading through the legal paperwork. Jake, my younger brother, was calling from his classroom during his lunch break. Marcus, what the hell is going on? Emma just called me crying, saying you threw her out and made threats against her. She's asking if she can stay at my place because she's afraid to be alone. I sank onto the couch, feeling the weight of how completely Emma had twisted the narrative. Jake, did she mention that she stole $15,000 from our medical fund while I was getting chemotherapy? She what? No, she said you were having medication-induced paranoia and accused her of stealing money that was never missing. In the first place, explained everything to Jake, from the bank account discovery to Emma's lies about the supposed business loan to David. As I talked, could hear my brother's breathing change. Jesus, Marcus, are you sure about all this? I can show you the bank records. I can show you how she changed all our passwords. Jake, she was wearing new expensive jewelry and getting text messages from David at 10 p.m. This isn't paranoia. It's evidence. Jake was quiet for a long moment. What do you need me to do? Nothing right now. Just know that whatever Emma tells you, there's a lot more to the story. And Jake, don't let her stay at your place. I have a feeling this is just the beginning of her trying to control the narrative. After hanging up with Jake, I realized I needed help navigating this situation. Emma clearly had a plan, and the restraining order suggested she was several steps ahead of me. I called my company's employee assistance program and asked for a referral to a divorce attorney. The lawyer, Patricia Hernandez, could see me that afternoon. Her office was in a sleek downtown building, and she had the kind of calm competence that made me feel like I might actually survive this mess. Mr. Williams' restraining orders in situations like this are often used as tactical maneuvers rather than genuine safety concerns. She explained after reviewing the paperwork. Your wife has effectively prevented you from investigating her financial activities or contacting potential witnesses to her behavior. Can she do that? Just lie to a court to get legal protection while she's committing fraud? Unfortunately, temporary restraining orders are often granted based on minimal evidence, with the assumption that it's better to err on the side of caution. However, you'll have a hearing in 2 weeks where you can present your side of the story. In the meantime, we need to document everything you've discovered about the missing money. Patricia helped me compile a comprehensive record of Emma's financial misconduct, bank statements showing the unauthorized withdrawals, screenshots of the changed passwords, and a timeline of her increasingly suspicious behavior. We also discussed filing for divorce and seeking restitution for the stolen funds. Mr. Williams, I have to ask about your prognosis. Given your cancer treatment, are you prepared for what could be a lengthy and stressful legal battle? I thought about Riley's words regarding patients who had strong support systems. I'm more prepared for this fight than I was for staying in a marriage where I was being robbed and gaslighted while fighting for my life. That evening, Riley texted asking how I was handling everything. I'd been hesitant to burden her with my personal drama, but her genuine concern felt like a lifeline. "Can I ask you something?" I texted back. "How do you handle watching patients go through treatment while their families fall apart around them?" Her response came quickly. "It's one of the hardest parts of this job. Cancer doesn't just attack the patient, it reveals who people really are under pressure. The good news is that it also shows you who your real support system is." I found myself wanting to talk to Riley about more than just medical updates. She had a way of seeing situations clearly, without judgment but with practical wisdom. She suggested meeting for coffee after my next treatment. I accepted immediately. The coffee shop she chose was a quiet place near the hospital. The kind of spot where medical professionals probably decompressed after difficult days. Riley looked different in civilian clothes, more relaxed, but somehow more approachable. Listened without interrupting as I told her about the restraining order in Emma's campaign to paint me as an unstable husband. "Marcus, can I tell you something that might sound harsh, but needs to be said?" I nodded, bracing myself. "Emma's behavior isn't a reaction to your cancer diagnosis. It's who she was all along. Cancer just created circumstances where her true character became impossible to hide. The affair, the theft, the manipulation, these are choices she made because this is who she is." The words hit me like a revelation. I'd been trying to understand how cancer had changed Emma, but Riley was right. Cancer hadn't changed Emma at all. It had simply removed the comfortable circumstances that had allowed her to hide her selfishness and dishonesty. "The woman you thought you married might never have existed," Riley continued gently. "Sometimes we fall in love with who we think someone could be, rather than who they actually are." I spent the next few days processing this perspective. Looking back through our relationship with fresh eyes, I could see patterns I'd ignored or explained away. Emma's tendency to prioritize her own needs, her skill at making me feel guilty for asking for support, her way of turning every conflict into evidence of my unreasonableness. The red flags had been there all along, hidden behind her charm and my willingness to accommodate her behavior. 3 days later, Jake called with news that confirmed my worst suspicions. "Marcus, you're not going to believe this. Emma came by my school today asking me to sign some kind of affidavit, saying you'd been acting erratically since your diagnosis. She wanted me to document times when you'd seemed confused or paranoid. Did you sign it?" "Hell no." She had this whole story prepared about how your medications were causing personality changes and memory problems. She even had medical articles printed out about chemo, brain, and psychological side effects. This wasn't some spur of the moment thing. She's been planning this. The premeditation was chilling. Emma hadn't just stolen my money and lied about it. She'd developed a comprehensive strategy to discredit me if I discovered her theft. The medical articles, the restraining order, the attempts to recruit family members as witnesses to my supposed instability, all of it was designed to make me look like an unreliable narrator of my own experience. At night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about all the times Emma had suggested my memory was faulty or my concerns were overblown. Many other things had she lied about. How long had she been planning her exit strategy from our marriage? I got up and made myself a cup of tea, then sat down with my laptop to do something I probably should have done weeks ago. I started researching David Chen and his company. If Emma had really loaned him money for legitimate business purposes, there should be some evidence of financial difficulties or pending investor deals. What I found instead was a thriving marketing consultancy with no apparent cash flow problems. David's LinkedIn profile showed recent photos from expensive business, conferences, and vacation trips. His company's website featured testimonials from satisfied clients and announcements about new contract wins. If this was a business in crisis, they were hiding it remarkably well. I dug deeper, looking through David's social media presence. His Instagram account was mostly professional content, but buried in the photos from recent weeks, I found something that made my stomach drop. A picture from what appeared to be an upscale restaurant showing 2 wine glasses and a caption that read, "Celebrating new beginnings with someone special." The timestamp on the photo was from 2 weeks ago, the same day Emma had told me she was working late on David's campaign crisis. I scrolled through more of his posts, looking for additional clues. Most of his content was generic business motivation and industry updates, but occasionally there were more personal glimpses. A photo of expensive concert tickets with the caption, "Date night done right." Pictures from a weekend trip to Fredericksburg wine country, carefully cropped to avoid showing his companion, but clearly indicating he wasn't traveling alone. The pieces were falling into place in a way that made me feel sick. Emma hadn't loaned David money to save his struggling business. She'd been funding their affair, possibly even helping him expand his lifestyle while I was barely able to afford my cancer treatment. I spent the rest of the night going through our credit card statements, looking for charges I couldn't account for. Emma had always handled most of our financial management, claiming she was better with details and organization. Now I realized she'd been managing our finances in ways that benefited her secret relationship. There were charges to restaurants I'd never been to, hotels in Austin when we both supposedly slept at home, purchases at stores that Emma claimed were for work events I later learned never happened. The pattern of deception was extensive, probably dating back months before my cancer diagnosis. The next morning, I called Patricia Hernandez and scheduled an emergency meeting. The evidence I'd gathered painted a picture of systematic fraud and adultery that went far beyond the missing emergency fund. "Mr. Williams, this is extensive financial misconduct," Patricia said after reviewing my documentation. "You can file for divorce based on adultery and seek restitution for all the money she's misappropriated, not just the emergency fund." "How long will this take?" "Given the complexity and the restraining order complications, probably 6 to 8 months. Are you prepared for that timeline, especially with your treatment schedule?" I thought about Riley's words regarding fighting for the right things. I'm prepared. Emma has stolen money I needed for cancer treatment and is trying to convince everyone I'm mentally unstable. Won't let her destroy my reputation while she runs off with her boyfriend. Patricia nodded approvingly. Good. Patients who advocate for themselves tend to get better outcomes, both medically and legally. That afternoon, I had another chemotherapy session. Riley was working again, and I found myself looking forward to seeing her in a way that had nothing to do with medical care. She had become a steady presence in my life during a time when everything else was falling apart. "You look different today," she said, as she prepared my more focused, maybe? The hearing for the restraining order was set for Thursday morning in downtown Austin. I arrived early, my stomach twisted with a mix of chemo-induced nausea and nerves about seeing Emma in front of a judge. Patricia had gone over everything with me, but nothing really prepares you to watch someone you once loved try to convince a courtroom you're a danger. Emma arrived not long after, accompanied by a polished attorney who looked like he thrived in high-conflict divorces. She had clearly curated her appearance, a modest navy dress, light makeup playing the part of a concerned, fragile spouse. She even flinched when she spotted me across the room, as though genuinely afraid. It was a well-rehearsed act. Judge Morrison called our case. Emma's attorney launched into their version of events, a tale of a loving wife overwhelmed by a husband, spiraling into paranoia and emotional instability brought on by cancer treatment. "Your Honor," he said, "Mrs. Williams has records showing Mr. Williams's behavior has grown increasingly erratic since starting chemotherapy. His own brother has raised concerns about his mental health, and his doctors have acknowledged that certain medications may contribute to confusion and paranoia." I clenched my jaw, furious as they twisted reality to make me look unhinged. Emma took the stand, voice trembling, eyes glossy with tears. She spoke of fear and helplessness, claiming I'd accused her of theft and thrown her out of our home without cause. Under the table, Patricia gently tapped my arm, a silent reminder to stay calm. When it was our turn, Patricia systematically tore apart Emma's narrative. She presented ironclad proof, bank records, screenshots, and clear evidence of unauthorized withdrawals from our medical emergency fund. "Mr. Williams was not hallucinating," Patricia said. "He was reacting appropriately to discovering his wife had removed $15,000 from a fund meant for his treatment without his knowledge and then locked him out of their financial accounts. Then came the affair documented through credit card statements, hotel bookings, and social media posts." Patricia even exposed Emma's attempts to manipulate family members into claiming I was unstable. "This isn't a case of a delusional cancer patient," she said. "This is a case of betrayal, financial abuse, and infidelity carefully concealed behind the guise of concern." Emma started to unravel as Patricia continued. Her attorney objected several times, but the evidence held strong. By the judge about the supposed business loan to David, Emma stammered, "Do you have any written agreement? Repayment terms? Anything?" "No," she whispered. "It was informal. He needed help, and I didn't want to stress Marcus out. And yet you took money from a medical account without informing your husband?" I thought I was protecting him. The judge didn't buy it. After a short recess, he delivered his ruling. The evidence shows Mr. Williams' actions were based on facts, not delusions. The restraining order is dismissed. However, due to the divorce proceedings and financial disputes, I'm ordering both parties to communicate only through legal counsel.
Outside the courtroom?
I felt drained, but relieved. Emma wouldn't even look at me as she left, but I caught the bitterness in her eyes. When she thought I wasn't watching, the mask was off. Patricia walked with me to the car, calm but firm. "Be prepared," she warned. Emma made double down. People like her don't lose quietly. I drove straight to the hospital for my next treatment, head still spinning. Riley was already there with my usual setup, but she could see I was worn thin. "How did it go?" she asked gently. The judge dismissed it. I said he saw through everything. "But I know, Emma, this isn't over." Riley looked thoughtful. "Hey, there's something I need to tell you." Mason Arlon, we're out of the work. We like Yesterday, you wanted to speak with your doctors about your mental health and treatment. My pulse quickened. What was she doing here? She claimed she was worried about the side effects: chemo brain, mental decline. She even brought a presentation, tried to meet with Dr. Martinez. Did anyone talk to her? No, you haven't given her permission to access your records. But Marcus, she knew your medication details, timing, dosage, even upcoming appointments. She's clearly been digging into your treatment. The realization that Emma had tried to manipulate my medical team felt like another violation. She'd been building a case against my mental competency from multiple angles, trying to convince anyone who would listen that I was an unreliable narrator of my own experience. "There's something else," Riley continued. "I probably shouldn't tell you this, but I think you deserve to know." Emma asked specifically about your prognosis and life expectancy. She wanted to know if your cancer was terminal. My hands went cold. She asked if I was dying. She framed it as concern about planning for your care. But Marcus, the way she asked the questions felt calculating, like she was trying to determine timelines for something. I sat back in the treatment chair, trying to process what Riley was telling me. Emma had been researching not just my mental state, but my survival prospects. Combined with the financial theft and affair, it painted a picture of someone planning for a future that didn't include me. "Riley, can I ask you something? In your professional opinion, what would someone gain by having their spouse declared mentally incompetent? Control over medical decisions, financial assets, insurance beneficiaries. If someone wanted to access their spouse's resources without interference, proving mental incapacity would be one way to do it."
Ow.
The implications were staggering. Emma hadn't just been stealing money and having an affair. She'd been positioning herself to take control of everything if my cancer took a turn for the worse. The woman I'd loved and trusted had been preparing to profit from my potential death, while actively undermining my treatment and support system. That evening, I called Jake to update him on the hearing and warn him about Emma's escalating tactics. "Marcus, I need to tell you something else." Emma called Mom. Our mother lived in Dallas and had been supportive but distant during my cancer treatment, mostly because Emma had been managing communications with my family. Mom wasn't tech-savvy and relied on Emma to keep her updated on my progress. Did Emma tell her that you'd had a mental breakdown related to your treatment and were making false accusations against her? She convinced Mom that you needed psychiatric intervention and that the family should consider having you committed for your own safety. I felt the ground shift beneath me. Did Mom believe her? At first, yes. Emma was very convincing, and she had medical terminology and specific examples of behavior that sounded credible. But then Mom called me to ask if I'd noticed signs of mental deterioration, and I told her what was really going on. How did Mom react? She was horrified. Mom said Emma had been calling her for weeks, gradually building this narrative about your declining mental state. She'd been setting the stage for a long time, Marcus. The systematic nature of Emma's campaign was becoming clear. She hadn't just reacted impulsively to being caught stealing money. She'd been implementing a comprehensive plan to discredit me with medical professionals, family members, and legal authorities. If I hadn't discovered the missing funds when I did, she might have succeeded in having me declared incompetent while continuing her affair and spending my assets. The next morning brought an unexpected visitor to my loft. David Chen was standing outside my building, looking nervous and checking his phone repeatedly. When he saw me approaching, he straightened up with the forced confidence of someone who'd rehearsed this encounter. Marcus, I'm David Chen. I think we need to talk. I studied Emma's affair partner. This man who'd been benefiting from my stolen medical funds while I underwent chemotherapy. He was tall and conventionally handsome, with the kind of polished appearance that came from expensive grooming and tailored clothes. Everything about him screamed success and privilege. I'm not supposed to have contact with Emma or anyone associated with her, I said, not inviting him inside. This isn't about Emma. This is about money that she told me was hers to give. I felt a flicker of satisfaction. Emma's lies were apparently catching up with her from multiple directions. What exactly did she tell you? David shifted uncomfortably. She said she was getting divorced and had liquidated some assets to invest in my company. She presented it as her own money from marital property settlements. And you believed that a woman going through divorce proceedings had $15,000 lying around to invest in your business? I know how it sounds now, but Emma was very convincing. She had documentation, bank statements, legal papers that made it look legitimate. I wondered what kind of fraudulent documentation Emma had created to convince David that stolen money was legitimate investment capital. The level of planning and deception required was breathtaking. David, that money was stolen from my medical emergency fund while I was receiving cancer treatment. Every dollar Emma gave you was money I needed for survival. David's face went pale. I had no idea. Marcus, I would never have accepted the money if I'd known the truth. Emma told me you were abusive and that she was leaving you for her own safety. And you believed that justified taking money from her? She said it was her money? Look, I know this situation is fucked up, but I genuinely thought I was helping someone escape a bad marriage. I studied David's face, trying to determine if he was genuinely remorseful or just scared about potential legal consequences. Either way, his admission that Emma had lied to him about the source of the money was useful evidence for the divorce proceedings. David, I'm going to ask you to do something, and your response will tell me whether you're actually sorry or just trying to cover your ass. He nodded anxiously. I want you to wire back every penny Emma gave you today, and I want you to provide my attorney with a written statement about how Emma misrepresented the source of the funds. Marcus, I already spent some of the money on business expenses. Can't just conjure up $15,000 immediately. Then you'll figure out how to get it back, won't you? Because the alternative is being named as a co-defendant in a fraud case. David's polished composure finally cracked completely. This is insane. I'm a victim here too. I'm allied to both of us. The difference is that you benefited from those lies while I was fighting for my life. You can choose to make this right. You can explain to a judge why you accepted money from a married woman without verifying its legitimacy. I watched David struggled with the reality of his situation. He thought he was the sophisticated businessman sweeping a woman away from her troubled marriage. Instead, he'd been the unwitting accomplice in a scheme to defraud a cancer patient. "I'll need some time to liquidate assets," he said finally. "You have 48 hours. After that, my attorney files additional charges." As David walked away, I felt a grim satisfaction. Emma's web of lies was unraveling from multiple directions. Her attempt to frame me as mentally unstable had failed in court. Her manipulation of my family had been exposed. And now, her affair partner was discovering that she'd involved him in criminal activity. That afternoon, Riley texted asking if I wanted to meet for dinner after her shift. For the first time in months, I found myself looking forward to something that had nothing to do with cancer treatment or legal battles. "How are you holding up with everything that's happening?" she asked, as we sat in a quiet restaurant near the hospital. "Better than I expected. Emma's tactics are becoming so extreme that they're actually working against her. It's hard to maintain sympathy for someone who tries to convince your family that you're mentally ill while stealing your medical funds." Riley nodded. "Sometimes the worst betrayals are also the most clarifying. They force you to see situations without the filters of hope or denial." "Riley, can I ask you something? Why have you been so supportive through all of this? You could have just handled my medical care professionally and stayed out of the personal drama." She was quiet for a moment, seeming to choose her words carefully. "Because I've watched too many good people get destroyed by partners who abandon them when things get difficult. Because, Marcus, you're worth fighting for, even when you can't see it yourself." The simple honesty of her answer hit me harder than all of Emma's elaborate manipulations. Riley wasn't trying to convince me of anything or gain something from me. She was just showing up consistently and telling me the truth. For the first time since my diagnosis, I began to believe that survival might mean more than just beating cancer. It might mean building a life with people who actually valued my presence in it. 6 months later, I stood in the oncology center for what Dr. Martinez assured me would be my final chemotherapy session. It's the same treatment room where I'd discovered Emma's betrayal now felt like a place of victory rather than vulnerability. Riley was there, as she had been for every session since that first devastating day. But now, she squeezed my hand as something more than just my nurse. The divorce had been finalized 3 weeks earlier, Emma's attempts to claim mental incompetence. In contrast, the prenuptial agreement had backfired spectacularly when Patricia presented the mountain of evidence we'd accumulated. David's sworn affidavit about Emma's lies, combined with the financial records and proof of adultery, had left Emma with virtually nothing. She'd been ordered to repay not just the stolen $15,000, but additional funds she'd misappropriated over the months leading up to my diagnosis. Most satisfying of all, she'd been stuck with the legal bills for both sides when the judge determined her fraud claims were frivolous and malicious. The woman who tried to leave me drowning in medical debt, while she ran off with her lover, ended up drowning in attorney fees instead. Jake had called me that morning with an update I'd been waiting for. "Marcus, you're not going to believe this. Emma contacted Mom again yesterday, trying to reconcile and asking for money to help with her legal expenses." I laughed, feeling lighter than I had in over a year. "What did Mom tell her?" "Mom told her that anyone who steals from a cancer patient deserves whatever consequences they get, and then hung up on her." I've never been more proud of our mother. Emma had burned every bridge she'd ever built, alienating not just me but my entire family with her manipulative tactics. Even her own sister had stopped returning her calls after learning the truth about the stolen medical funds. David had managed to repay most of the money, though it had required him to sell his car and liquidate investment accounts. His business partnership with Emma had dissolved acrimoniously when other clients learned about the fraud allegations. Last I'd heard, he was working for someone else's marketing firm and would be paying back the remainder of what he owed me for the next 2 years. The poetic justice was almost too perfect. Emma had gambled everything on a scheme to profit from my potential death, and instead had lost her marriage, her reputation, her financial security, and her affair partner in one spectacular implosion. As Riley disconnected my for the final time, I felt a surge of gratitude that had nothing to do with surviving cancer. Emma's betrayal had been devastating, but it had also led me to understand what genuine love and support actually looked like. Riley had never wavered, never made my illness about her own needs, never treated my recovery as an inconvenience to her schedule. She'd been present for the difficult moments and celebrated the victories,
Asking nothing in return except the chance to be part of my life.
3 months after my final treatment, Riley and I were planning our wedding. Nothing elaborate or expensive, just a small ceremony in Zilker Park surrounded by the people who'd actually shown up when it mattered. Jake would be my best man, and my mother was flying in from Dallas with excitement I hadn't heard in her voice since before my diagnosis. The guest list was deliberately small. We'd learned the value of quality over quantity when it came to relationships. Every person invited had proven their loyalty during the darkest period of my life. I'd returned to work part-time at TechFlow, gradually rebuilding my energy and finding purpose in solving complex problems again. Photography had become more than just a hobby. I was documenting other cancer patients' journeys, helping them find beauty and hope during their own battles. Riley and I had bought a house together in South Austin, a cozy place with a garden, where I was learning to grow things instead of just surviving them. The contrast with my sterile downtown loft couldn't have been more stark. This felt like a home built on honesty and mutual support rather than accommodation and performance. One evening, as we sat on our back porch watching the sunset, Riley brought up something that had been on both our minds. "Marcus, do you ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't discovered the missing money when you did?" I considered the question seriously, but probably would have succeeded in having me declared incompetent. She might have gained control of my medical decisions, my finances, everything. I could have died believing that I was the problem in our marriage. That terrifies me, it should. But Riley had also taught me something important. The worst thing that can happen isn't dying from cancer. It's living with people who see your suffering as an opportunity for their own gain. Riley leaned against my shoulder. "You think you'll ever trust completely again?" "I trust you completely. The difference is that you've earned it through consistency, not just words." Emma was always telling me how much she loved me, but love is what you do, not what you say. 6 months later, I received an unexpected piece of mail. Emma had written me a letter from the small apartment she was renting across town, where she'd moved after losing our loft in the divorce settlement. The letter was a masterpiece of self-pity and revisionist history. She claimed that her affair with David had been emotional support during the stress of my illness. Taking the money had been a misguided attempt to secure our financial future, and that she'd only lied because she was afraid of how I'd react during treatment. Even in her attempt at an apology, Emma couldn't take full responsibility for her choices. She was still the victim of circumstances, still the misunderstood wife who'd made mistakes while trying to help. I showed the letter to Riley, who read it with the clinical detachment of someone who'd seen too many people refuse accountability for their actions. "She's asking you to forgive her and give her another chance," Riley observed. "What do you think I should do?" Riley handed the letter back to me. "I think you should do exactly what you did the day you discovered her theft. Choose yourself and the people who actually care about your well-being." I walked out to our backyard and dropped Emma's letter into our fire pit, watching years of manipulation and lies turn to ash. Some bridges weren't worth rebuilding, especially when you'd already found a better path forward. That weekend, Riley and I drove out to the same spot at Zilker Park where I'd taken those first photographs during my treatment. The wildflowers were blooming again, reaching toward the sun with the same determination that had carried me through the darkest period of my life. I set up my camera and captured Riley laughing in the golden afternoon light, her engagement ring catching the sun as she reached for my hand. These were the moments worth documenting. The beauty that emerged not despite struggle but because of the wisdom it had taught us. Emma had tried to profit from my pain but instead had given me the greatest gift imaginable. She'd shown me the difference between conditional and unconditional love, between people who show up and people who show off, between partners who see crisis as opportunity and partners who see it as a chance to prove their commitment. As we walked back to our car that evening, I realized I'd never felt more grateful for anything than I felt for surviving Emma's betrayal. Not just because I'd escaped her manipulation, but because it had led me to Riley and to a life built on truth instead of performance. The cancer was gone, the divorce was final, and the stolen money had been repaid with interest. But more importantly, I'd learned to recognize the difference between people who love you and people who love what you can do for them. some lessons. Can only be learned through betrayal, but they're worth every painful moment when they lead you home to the right person. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.